Hello everyone, this is the DSP and Stuttering Craig stream or interview, whatever you want to call it, that took place a few days ago on the 5th. For anyone who does not know, this is a follow-up on their first interaction, or I shouldn't say that, I should say first interaction involving DSP as a major content creator that occurred about over a year ago now, where DSP was invited on Craig's Side Scroller podcast to do an interview slash answer questions regarding his history online. Of course, it did not go well for DSP, as they asked him questions about his past and his online activities, and then very quickly smelt through DSP's bullshit when he tried to avoid the question, obfuscate, give non-answers. It wasn't until after the interview took place where Stuttering Craig and his co-hosts and a few other people who work on the Side Scrollers podcast did a decompression stream where they spoke about their experience talking to DSP, specifically highlighting how frustrating it was, the obvious lies and the disrespect that DSP was showing to their show and to the time that they put in to speak with him. This, of course, upset DSP, where he proceeded to insult them, say that because they asked, quote, detractor questions, end quote, that nothing they say should matter, and just did as usual, threw a temper tantrum, and then started banning people who mentioned it. Well, it would seem that DSP had a bit of a change of heart because he decided to let Craig on. I shouldn't say let Craig on, or have a stream with Craig to talk about the original interview that took place. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I have seen this interview before, both the Side Scrollers one and now this current one. The original plan was to make this a full scripted video pulling clips. However, after setting up an outline saying that it was about 8 pages long, it really dissuaded me from doing a full script. So what I decided instead is just go through the stream. I have a few things that I want to make sure I hit on and just give some commentary about what this is like, because boy is it something. You're not into DSP much, if you don't know much about DSP, that's fine. At the end of the day, no matter what your level of knowledge about DSP is, he still comes out looking like a complete piece of shit. But without further ado, let's go ahead and start the stream here.
And just to forewarn everyone, and just to preface the whole conversation we're about to have, Stuttering Craig is on here today, and thank you for your time, Craig, for being on my Level 1 podcast, to have a conversation with me about last year, what happened with the events leading up to, including, and after my appearance on the Side Scrollers podcast, because there's been a lot of stuff said, all right, on my side particularly for sure, and a lot of heated stuff I've said. Craig has responded on his content, and we never really sat down to have a conversation about it publicly. And I feel like this is the best way to do it, is to have a forum where we're just going to be cordial with each other. We're going to talk about it, hash it out, figure out exactly what happened, and figure out how to move forward from here. This is not an attack session on Craig. I've already said this right before.
Okay. Already, this is not an attack section on Craig. That went out the window pretty quickly. I mean, by the end of the stream, it's pretty obvious that DSP came into this specifically looking to attack Craig. More specifically, discredit him, and then try to make the valid criticisms he brings up invalid by using um, the usual excuses he'll use. The word detractor, the detractor questions gets thrown around a lot. Of course, DSP ignoring, obfuscating, and avoiding questions, and of course projecting. The usual dark side Phil recipe. It just goes to show exactly who DSP is, right? There is no cordial interactions. He obviously doesn't want to move forward, right? This is all for drama. Despite constantly saying he hates drama, he loves drama. This is what he's about. And just, again, this goes to show exactly what he's really about.
Before Craig showed up, so I'm going to say it again because now we're actually have him on the show. This is not, oh, I don't like Craig, let's all in the chat rally against him and insult him and stuff. This is not, let's all take pot shots on Craig. There is no surprise guests that are going to show up. There is no shocking gotcha questions here. It's literally not about anything about Craig's background or nothing. This is about just our interaction last year. That's the point. And Craig, I want you to know that up front, because I know you had said that, of course, my detractors have to interject themselves into every piece of anything I'm involved in. And they've been contacting Craig saying, oh, he's going to get you. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. That's not going to happen. All right. Well, but now, go ahead.
And that's great. I was going to say, and to be fair, I mean, I have invited you. I've tried to do this probably 3 or 4 times since the end of that show to kind of have.
Interestingly enough, Craig says he's tried to do this 3 or 4 times with DSP. Do I know if that's true? Don't know for sure. However, DSP doesn't offer any pushback to this, so I assume it's true, which led me to question why now. But I've quickly answered my own question. I put out videos in the past talking about Kino Casino and DSP's personality change based on that, and obviously this is just that, right? DSP is the one day he's the no drama guy and he doesn't even watch his detractors. The next day he knows the ins and outs of every single one of his detractors. One day he talks about never doing any interviews because there's no one who could interview him, to doing all sorts of interviews, going on different shows. This is something that I'm probably going to say a lot, but just complete chameleon, right? There is no real DSP. DSP is whatever he needs to be at the moment for what he thinks will increase his popularity or make him more money. Interestingly enough, when we get further into this interview, DSP is going to talk more about the aftermath of the original Side Scrollers podcast interview, and he's going to mention going on stream with Craig and with his co-host to decompress and talk about the stream, but he shut that down pretty quickly after Stuttering Craig's and his co-host's actual decompression stream, where they were bringing up how easily they smelt DSP's bullshit. But now, of course, it's time to bring him on, because the Kino Casino let him sniff their nuts enough. He got high on the fumes, high enough that he forgets that DSP is a habitual liar who only holds his internet presence together by forming a shield wall of retarded, in some cases literally retarded, dents to support him. But I digress.
Have this exact conversation. So I am glad we're actually getting around to, like I said, I said multiple times, I don't care if it's on our show or if it's on your show. I don't care. I think this is great. I'm glad we're able to.
All right, good. Now, that being said, I'd like to introduce Handsome Tom and Perfect Liz to the show. No, I'm just kidding. That's not happening.
Listen, honestly, I would love that. I would honestly love it. Great.
Okay, so I think what we should do to start the conversation is give a little bit of background about Craig, because a lot of people, on my show may not know, but Craig's been in this space for a very, very long time. Craig, in my opinion, was one of the innovators of making video game content on the internet. I mean, in the mid-2000s, right? You were making big view content on your Screw Attack website. And this was before the era of like YouTube being prominent and everything. Like, you were there in the forefront, covering video games, doing countdowns, news stories, going to conventions, doing all kinds of stuff. And you've always been a prominent person in that space. It's not like you've come out of nowhere now with this side-scroller show in the last year. You actually have a history, a big established history of making very prominent content. That's how I knew Craig, is because I used to actually watch the side-scroller show way back in the day in the mid-2000s. And I was a fan of the Angry Video Game Nerd, who was associated with Screw Attack at the time. So that's kind of how I got turned onto their content and started watching. Over the years, I did have association with Craig and Screw Attack. For example, I went to, which I know Craig says he doesn't remember, I don't blame him. Way before I was even a YouTuber, I went to MagFest, this gaming convention, and we hung out like the whole time. Like, I was with these guys and we were playing Street Fighter. We played Call of Duty together at the time. There was a Call of Duty competition, and we even judged a Rock Band competition together. I don't even know if you remember that.
Did we?
Yes, we did. We were both judges on the panel, judging people doing Rock Band and stuff. It was fun.
Okay.
So that was like our first personal interaction. And then fast forward to years later, I was a YouTuber. I was a big YouTuber in the gaming space. I was like not top, but I was bringing in 10 million views a month on my DSP gaming channel. And I wanted to go to conventions and stuff. And I had contacted you when you said you were reviving the Screw Attack Gaming Convention. You were bringing it out of retirement. And I said, I would love to be there as a guest. And you had me as a guest. And let me tell you, Craig, you were the most gracious dude. Like, I knew that you didn't really remember me from MagFest at the time. You were like the most nice guy to me. You were there, and you had a table, a vendor booth, and there was a little misunderstanding about a vendor booth with someone else, and we hashed all that out. And basically, you were so cool. And so from my history of knowing you,
it's interesting. It really seems like DSP is going out of his way to really butter up Craig. If it was just him explaining their history, but he just goes out of his way again and again during the past few minutes, talk about how cool of a dude Craig is, how good of a dude he is, how big he is on YouTube, how he's super successful. But as I thought about it more, it's like, is this like Boogie 2988 style of manipulation, or is this just DSP being DSP and there's nothing really behind it? Frankly, I don't know. Honestly, I think I might give the benefit of the doubt to DSP here, just because I know how few social skills he has. So the idea that DSP is going out of his way to socially engineer a reaction from Craig, or to change his temperament to be able to get away with more during the interaction, I don't know. I just thought it was important to point out that DSP is making absolutely sure to take the time out to prop Craig up a lot more than he was doing, especially after the Side Scrollers interview.
you, Craig, you were just a really nice guy. You were a good guy in the gamer space, making this content. We hung out at MagFest. You were so personable. You're such a nice guy. Meet you at Screw Attack Gaming Convention. So all the history I know of you is that you're just a really solid dude, right?
So what changed? What changed, Phil? When did I become so irrelevant?
Oh, irrelevant. Not irrelevant. That's not, absolutely not. But basically, I want to preface this of how this whole thing came about, why I would even want to be on your show and stuff like that. So I heard, what was it? It was either late 2022 or early 2023. I heard through the grapevine, hey, Phil, did you hear that Side Scrollers is coming back? And I was like, no, I didn't know that. Let me check it out. So I actually did my research, and I saw that you had announced that you were going to bring back Side Scrollers. It was going to be a fun podcast about gaming and, all this stuff. And I got interested because I'm like, wow, that's cool. I used to listen to the show when it was audio only way back when, and it would be cool to see
Right.
a revival. Now, I didn't know if you were going to have anyone back from the old show or anything, but I was like, I'm just curious. So I actually started listening to and watching your show when you revived it. And I just was thinking in the back of my head, now I know at this point, everyone hates me, right? Like, I'm the guy you love to hate on the internet. I'm the guy everyone dumps on as a content creator. But I'm like, man, it would be fascinating if out of nowhere, out of the blue, if Stuttering Craig contacted me and asked me to be on his show. Because that would be wild, because I don't go on shows, right? I don't do interviews. I don't do anything. It would be such a cool thing for a guy from my past who, you know, I have a good relationship with. I mean, it's been 10 years since I talked to the guy, but it would be pretty cool if that happened. And then lo and behold, you actually did. And I never thought in my wildest dreams you would have. So what I'd like to preface is that now we're getting to, you know, talking about what happened last year. What actually happened that you reached out to me like that out of the blue after 10 years of no contact?
Yeah, I think that, you know, when Side Scrollers was starting, you know, the show's evolved, right? Because it's now a decade later. Right? You can't be doing the same thing that you were doing a decade before and expect success. Evolving time. So, you know, Side Scrollers, the old show used to be once a week for 30, but that was podcast 2006, 2015. Right? It was like,
Craig, your audio is breaking up a little bit, and I don't know if it's your settings or your mic. It kind of sucks. It is breaking up a little.
so the long and short of it was like, and
Uh-oh. Yeah, Craig, we can't hear you now at all for some reason. I don't know what's going on.
it showing that I'm
Yeah, it's still you're breaking up. People are saying if you talk louder, you get closer to the mic. I don't know. It could be sensitivity settings in Discord as
should
well.
I get closer to the microphone?
Actually,
Is it better?
that's actually good.
All right, then I will sit right here the entire
Seriously,
time.
that's like really good.
Okay, and we'll just hold my microphone up right here. Okay, so when Side Scrollers, when I was like, okay, we got to bring back Side Scrollers, and the idea behind it was, I left the video game space in its entirety for better part, you know, for about a year. I went and I worked at the firearm, and when I left that startup, I looked back at the video game, and I didn't really have a whole lot of intention of ever going back. But I looked back to the video game industry places, like what happened, and that was the origin story for Sides. So, you know, the idea of bringing it back was really like there needs to be show needs to come back, and you know, when we first did the show, the idea was we were going to try to mimic it after the old show, and the internet's not the same as it was 10 years. So naturally, the show had to shift.
The internet is not the same as it was 10 years ago. You know, the irony saying that to DSP of all people. I don't believe this was necessarily Craig taking a dig at DSP, but I couldn't help but just acknowledge, like, out of anyone, any content creator, you could tell that to, has to be DSP.
And show has shifted, and you know, it's become more of a live. It's not necessarily a podcast. People do listen to the audio version of the show, but it's more about being there in the live experience, right? So there's always 3 of us, 4 of us, the 4th person. Chat always has a voice as well.
Right.
So, you know, I just like back at Screw Attack, I knew that just how you got to know Screw Attack through the Video Game Nerd, or people got to know any of the number of partners that we've had throughout the years through Screw Attack. It's always good to grow through association and the whole rising tides aspect. And that was always something from the start. Was I want there to be a base crew, and we'll have guests every day, and it'll be a rotating cast of characters. And that's where it came down. For, you know, I did a few interviews beforehand, and the idea was, well, I'll just reach out to everybody that I used to know and see if they're interested. So you were brought up, and I had not heard or talked to you in a decade. As you said, I certainly didn't know any of the lore and kind of really anything. I didn't know if you'd seen success on YouTube. I didn't know if you'd seen. I certainly didn't know about the detractor stuff. So that was, when we announced it, when I reached out to you and you're like, sure, I was like, okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight one quick thing here. For anyone who watched the Side Scrollers interview and the decompression stream, or if you're coming back from later in this interview, you'll know that Stuttering Craig and his co-host Bullshit Meter went off pretty quickly when talking to Phil. And this is coming from someone, Craig, who is saying he didn't really have any idea who DSP was when he announced the show. And don't get me wrong, he did do research for this. I don't want to say he came in completely blind, but he was obviously had some holes in his knowledge about DSP. But even that, just how obvious it is when DSP is bullshitting, which is all the time. It just makes it so difficult for anyone to defend him. It's just so easy to tell that he's fake. That his whole shtick is just bullshit.
Cool. And the intention was for you to come on and just be a regular guest on the show.
Right.
And keep in mind, I think we're like 2 weeks into the show. I think we launched February 5th. And I think I announced you like the 1st of March, maybe like February 20th or whatever. And when I announced you, and I announced several people at, on that show, it was like, I remember almost immediately getting emails where like, dude, you sure about that? Like, are you sure? Do you know what's going on? I was like, no, I didn't know, your entire background. So then the flood of communication comes in, and some people are like, you should not have Phil on your show. You should not. And I was like my thing is communication. I like having conversations once again, which is why I've reached out to you, in the past about like, hey, well, let's just hash this out. And so naturally, people, they reach out, they're like, do you know this about Phil? Do you know this about Phil? No, and it became very obvious that there was a lot of lore to you and a lot of questions about it that people didn't either were assuming or didn't know the which is why I reached out. And I remember saying like, okay, listen, the intention was to have you on the show, but it's very obvious. Like, we just have this show, do a normal show, and not address the elephant in the room, which is, the fact that you haven't been on the show in a decade, that you have all these questions about mobile games and blah, 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 and all this stuff. Like, then number one, it's a missed opportunity for you. And I don't want to be the guy who just like ignores all these questions, right? Because, it's interesting. So that's how it, and I was like, well, then we need to do an interview. And that's how the interview came about, right? And so we did the interview. You gave us 5 hours, which was very nice. I think you probably would have gone longer had everyone not kind of been tired. I mean, talking 5 hours.
And I just wanted to say, like, again, to give DSP his credit. He did stay for 5 hours on the Side Scrollers interview. Obviously, all the bullshit and all the stereotypical DSP stuff aside, he stayed on for 5 hours. He stayed on when Keemstar showed up. I'd be remiss if I didn't give him some credit for that.
That for hours was a lot,
right?
And you told us we were very professional. You really enjoyed the interview.
Yes.
I remember you saying in particular you wanted to do it again. Like, right. Okay, cool.
Okay, hold on, because people are making some very positive suggestions. They're saying if there's anything in your settings that's like noise cancellation or stuff like that, because what's happening is you're talking, and as soon as you stop, it's dropping the next word you say, as if noise cancellation is like kicking in on your mic. That seems to be the issue. I don't think it's actually the distance. It's some kind of a noise cancellation filter, or you know what I mean, like a noise gate.
Yeah, this is weird. Good.
Dio says there is a settings gear icon in the lower left of Discord. You click on that, there will be a voice and video tab or menu, and then there's an input sensitivity all on the left, and that would fix it.
So if I unclick that, will that be better?
Let's see.
Is that better now?
That sounds great.
Shout out to DSP's chat for fixing the issues with his streams. Pretty common occurrence, I'd say.
Actually, I think we did it. Thank goodness.
Yeah, that apparently that was apparently the culprit here.
All right.
Sensitivity.
We've done it.
F you, Discord. Okay, so that leads us to we do the interview and
Right. Well,
and
actually, let me jump in because I do want to talk a little bit about my perspective going into this interview and the conversations we had. All right, because we want to be transparent about this, and I want to hear your perspective, and I wanted to give my perspective, because let's be honest, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. That's what happens in all these situations. Okay, so from my perspective, you contact me out of the blue, and you say, I want you to be a guest on the show, and I'm thinking in my head, I've been watching the show, and the show's been pretty entertaining. These guests get to kind of showcase their expertise from where they come from. They talk about the topics you're talking about, so it makes them look personable, it makes them look good, and then they get to kind of talk about their brand or whatever they're working on. And for me, I actually was just launching a new channel called DSP React, and the idea was that I was going to try to use this appearance as a way to kind of launch this channel. I had all these ideas for things for the channel and everything.
One thing I wrote down in my notes is to imagine. Imagine if DSP went on the Side Scroller show and they spent 5 hours talking about the business of streaming or gaming content, and DSP tried to show off his reacting skills. Obviously the way they ended up doing the interview didn't go great for DSP, but honestly, there's a good chance it would have gotten worse if he tried to do it the other way.
And this is a way to get it out to a new audience. Maybe you're not interested in seeing me play games, but maybe you want to see some kind of React style content, right? So originally I was just supposed to be the guest, and then you said, well, there's an elephant in the room. All these people want me to interview. And I was like, well, I knew this was coming because you might not realize this, but the year before, a lot of other prominent YouTubers have been talking about me in a very negative light. Okay, one of them was actually Moist Critical, and he had called me out for my grifting, that I was e-begging too much, and how could I do this to my viewers and stuff like that. And when he had done that, I was like, I agree with him, because now when I look back at how I was talking.
And now I agree with him. Just wait until the Kino Casino dents stop throwing money into the WWE Champions Relief Fund. We'll see how quickly that outlook lasts. DSP's done this before. Obviously, it's probably most well known for being a prolific e-beggar. And there have been times throughout his history where he's changed, quote, changed. I'm different now, I understand what it was wrong. That's usually when money's rolling in, right? Like the vest streak, for example. But once that money stops, the begging always comes back. Again, DSP is a chameleon, right? He has no true personality. Personality is whatever he thinks will get him more money.
On a particular stream, like, I agree with this guy. Like, I'm being a miserable wretch. I'm being an ungrateful jerk. I said, but the thing is, if that's the case, right, why don't you ever interview me? Like, if everyone has a problem with me and the way I conduct myself or whatever, I would just like to be interviewed and treated like a person rather than yelled at across the internet from their people's high perches.
You don't get interviewed because on numerous occasions in the past, you've outright said you refuse to do interviews. Right, and the only interview you did before Side Scrollers was the completely scripted interview you did with who was it? The Quartering, right? It was obviously just a huge fluff piece, and everyone was upset because it was a massive fluff piece that they were promoting as like an actual interview. He complains like, "Oh, no one will do interviews." Like, how many people have offered to do interviews with you? Obviously, he immediately says everyone who's offered in the past was a detractor. If I remember correctly, he even says this later in this stream. But that's the point with DSP, right? Everyone who doesn't treat him like a queen or a princess is a detractor. So there's no one who will actually be able to interview him, because the minute you start actually asking him questions, the minute you become a detractor, the minute DSP refuses to engage with you.
It's kind of like punching down, right? I'm just a little rinky-dink guy, and I got these giant YouTubers talking about me in a negative way. And I had announced the year before I want to do an interview. Well, of course, who contacts me? Who wants to do an interview? All my detractors, all these assholes. And I'm like, you know what? After thinking about it, I don't want to do an interview because they're just going to waste my time. It's just going to be really unfair treatment. So then when you reached out to me and now all of a sudden you're saying, oh, this is going to be an interview, I'm thinking, dude, I know Craig. Craig is a straight guy, you know? He's a straight shooter. He's not going to do anything to screw me during this interview. He's going to hit me with hard questions, and I want him to hit me with hard questions. I think I even...
No, you don't. No, you fucking don't. Well, I want to hit me with hard questions. Fuck you don't. Anyone who asks you hard questions is a detractor, right? Those are detractor questions, according to DSP. Again, he thought Craig had no idea who he was. You know, he thought that he could go in, bullshit his way through the interview, head on out, get a stamp on his book, and then his, hug box of dents will praise him for stepping outside of his circle. But no, unfortunately for DSP, Craig decided to actually do some research. Right? He knew a bit about what he was talking about. He knew about WWE Champions. He knew about the bankruptcy. He knew about the bank leaks. And while I wish he knew a bit more, so he could have pushed back more on the lies that DSP told during the Side Scholars interview, he knew enough to pretty quickly pick up on the fact that DSP was bullshitting him the whole time.
Told you that previously when we were talking. So you can ask me whatever the heck you want. You might not like the answers.
You said you wanted it to be the definitive DSP interview, right?
You can ask me whatever you want. You wanted this to be the definitive DSP interview. Remember that. That'll be brought up later.
And just to be clear, did I do anything during that interview that was dishonorable, or did I hit you at anything that because like I said, you finished that interview and you thought it was very fair. So
yeah.
Did
I would say there were a few times that things were suspect, but at the same time, it was never outright like, oh, disrespectful gotcha moment or something like that. The one thing everyone's going to say is when Keemstar showed up, right? Now, I don't know how that came about. You know what? Let's clear the air about that right now.
Sure.
How on earth did Keemstar end up in my interview? Because obviously that was a shock. And if you remember how it happened, it was really questionable circumstances. Someone DDoS'd me off the internet. So I couldn't even continue the interview. And as I got DDoS attacked, Keemstar showed up on the show, and everyone's like, what the heck is this? Like, I'm sure this is a coincidence, right? So what actually happened?
Yeah, well, and once again, it's been 18 months, so I'm actually going to go through and I'm going to look through my DMs right now to make sure I'm saying this correctly. But from what I recall, he had, like most people at the time, had reached out via DM, and let me see. I don't like to divulge private conversations, but let me go back as best I possibly can to see. Let's see, we did that on what?
FYI, because I don't know if you know this, Craig. I had Keem on the show last week, and we hashed everything out. We're good.
Cool. Excellent.
So, there's no issue. There's no bad.
Yeah, he hashed everything out with the man he called Evil, who he said made blood money, and that he would never be involved with anything that Keemstar was associated with because he viewed his content as abhorrent. Until Keemstar defended DSP on duty streams, then, oh, it's all buddy-buddy, we're hashing things out. Again, fucking chameleon. Changing his colors again. No fucking values.
Blood between me and him, so it's not like, oh, you're going to divulge something that he's going to be pissed about. Nah, we even talked about the appearance and everything, why he was on the show, so it's all good. I want to hear from your perspective how it came about.
So I think somebody had mentioned the idea of having him on, and I was like, well, if you're watching, then DM me. So he DM'd me, and the idea was like, look, you said beforehand you didn't want to talk with him, right? And I was like, fine, that's fine. Now, you said your internet went out, right? So that was like, okay, well, let's take this opportunity to, we got Phil here. Let's take this opportunity to bring Keem in, right? Because he had DM'd me, and he was like, let's talk. And if you recall, during that interview, like, I was attempting to honor your word there. You said you didn't want to talk to Keem. So I went out of my way to be like, listen, we'll only have Keem on if you're okay with it. And the intention and I think I've said this at the time, was to build a bridge, right? Was to build a bridge. And to think about this, you probably wouldn't have had Keem on last week had we not done that on Side Strollers, had it not opened up the communication between the two, right?
Maybe, I disagree. I would have had Keem on regardless. I don't think that.
Yeah, I hate to say it, I agree with DSP here. Right? For all the credit that Craig deserves for handling DSP during this interview, he did get this wrong, right? DSP couldn't give two shits about, what Keemstar says on Side Scrollers. He only cared that he defended him on duty streams, and that DSP can use Keemstar's name to clickbait and get more money. Remember, chameleon.
Him being on the interview had anything to do with him being on this show last week.
That's fair. Totally fair. But like I said, I'm just going off assumptions. I don't know.
That's fine. I want to hear your perspective. So this is good. This is good.
So the idea was to build a bridge, right? And whether it worked or not, that's fine. So we had you on, and when your internet came back, it was like, okay, I believe, and like I said, been 18 months. I believe we pulled Keem back, brought you back on, and said, hey, we have Keem here. Are you okay with this? Before Keem came back on, right? And the way I like to think of it is probably like it's halftime of a basketball game, right? So you go down to the sideline reporter to talk to the coach, right? Or something along those lines. And you get there, and like Keem being the color commentator at the time to provide, hey, how do you think this is going type of thing, if that's the best analogy that I can give, like off the cuff. But yeah, it wasn't meant to be malicious by any means. And nothing that we've ever done has meant to be malicious towards you. And I've stated that continuously in my communication with you. It's never been meant to be to tear you down or make, as your words, make money off your misery. That's never been an intention at all. So, yeah.
Okay. So I understand what you're saying. I get it. But you have to understand that from an outsider's perspective, okay? Even what you just said, a lot of people didn't know. A lot of people didn't know that I had told you beforehand that I didn't want to talk to Keem on this interview. So you've been told ahead of time, I don't want an interaction with this man. Literally, one of my trolls who works at Comcast DDoS's me. I'm serious. This is proven. It happened. There's actually evidence now, and the person's been fired. So the troll who works at my ISP DDoS's me to kick me off my own interview. And you bring specifically the guy I told you I don't want any involvement in this interview onto the interview stream. So I think you can understand how that looks, right?
So while you're gone, I'm actually looking at our DMs with right now. He said, let me pop on so when he comes back, he can respond, right? Because I believe in.
I am sympathetic to some extent with DSP's argument here, especially if he clarified before the interview that he didn't want Keemstar on. However, as Craig will go on to explain, he did, kick Keem off the stream when DSP came back, and he did ask DSP if he was okay with Keem being on, as well as the fact that Keemstar was a topic of conversation during the stream, specifically around the money he was offering. If I remember correctly, it was like $25K to do, I believe $25K up front to do Locale Live. And this was brought up in regards to DSP's constant begging, right? You constantly talk about needing money for your food or rent, making sure all your bills are paid, but you won't take $25,000 up front to do like an hour a week with, Keemstar, Boogie, and Wings of Redemption. And this is, where we got a lot of the comments like Keemstar's blood money, he's an evil person, etc. And this will come back later in the interview as well, but till then.
Once again, 18 months. I believe we were talking about Keemstar beforehand, right? So he was broached, the conversation about him was brought up, right? So I'm of the mindset that if I would rather talk with somebody than about somebody, right? And I've said that many, many times on our show, and I say that right now, which is why, once again, I'd much rather talk with you than about you. So I think that was the situation. He said, let me pop in so when he comes back, he can respond, right? And the idea that you said something about Keem then responded, you come back and you can then respond to what Keem said while still keeping you separate, right? But the opportunity was there. We're like, hey, well, look, once again, Keem, you can talk about DSP. DSP, you can talk about Keem. Why don't you just talk to each other right now and hash all this shit out, and everyone's better for it, right? So, you know, if you saw it as like I said, my goal ultimately wasn't to, you know, create any distrust or anything. It was more meant to be a positive experience, and hopefully it was.
Okay, so from my perspective, all right, you're absolutely right. So I'm getting DDoS attacked. I come back, and you ask me, hey, Keem's on the show already. Is it okay? Can we have him on? You absolutely did that. I can confirm 100%. I mean, it's already recorded, but yes, you did that. Yeah. That's very respectful of you that you did that, and I said yes. In my mind, I'm already desperately trying to get back on the show, because if it looks like I cut out of the show, everyone on the internet is going to say I'm a coward. I ran from the tough questions. So I'm doing everything I can to get back as soon as I can.
Fucking bullshit. If DSP actually cared about being called a coward or people thinking he was dodging questions, he wouldn't have spent a 5-hour interview with the side scrollers being a fucking coward, dodging questions, and just fucking bullshitting them the entire time. Fucking disrespectful. Obviously, this is just fake shit, right? It's trying to make Craig look bad, look biased. He's trying to plant the idea that Craig had ill intentions going into the interview, trying to do a gotcha style interview with DSP so he can brush the entire thing off by saying he's a detractor. You know, DSP Playbook 101.
The moment I get back, he's there, and it's like, I've already being grilled, and this is probably, you know, a very stressful thing going on. I'm sure you could figure out for me. And then to now be presented with the man who I told you specifically I didn't want to talk to on the show, yeah, it smacked me in the face. And then on top of that, you say, well, is it okay? Now, what if I say no? Again, now that makes me look bad. I look like I'm the guy who doesn't want to play ball, who isn't willing to talk, who's just an obstinate jerk, who just wants to, you know, have it his way. So, of course, I'm going to say yes.
I would be sympathetic to this argument if not for everything I just mentioned. Again, you know, if DSP wasn't DSP, if he was almost anyone else who wasn't a complete piece of shit, then I could understand why. But DSP's entire online career is about him dodging questions, being a coward, as he says, an obstinate jerk. You know, DSP's trying to act like no one knows who he is, even though he's been on the internet for decade plus now. Again, just trying to fuck with people who don't know enough about DSP to know better.
Yes. Now, in reality, did anything come out of that conversation with Keem? No.
Yes.
But
yes, it did. And DSP is going to talk briefly about this some more, but figured I'd get this out of the way now. DSP fails to mention the most important part of Keemstar's time on side scrollers, specifically when they talked about the hypocrisy of DSP telling everyone to ignore his detractors and his haters, and being upset that people form opinions of him based on those detractors and haters, while at the very same time admitting that his entire view of Keemstar is based on Keemstar's detractors and Keemstar's haters. Again, DSP's never going to mention this, of course, because it makes him look like a massive hypocrite.
what happened was we went back and forth for like 5 minutes. Nothing came of it. And then he plugged his Happy Punch boxing, okay, which is really the reason why he was on the show. All right, that's why he wanted to be on your show, to plug his upcoming content. All right, he did want to talk to me for sure. That's true, but he definitely was on the show to plug his content, and that's literally what you allowed him to do, is do an advertisement. Okay.
So, okay, real quick, and once again, it's been 18 months, it's been a year and a half. My things are a little fuzzy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking through my email, and I actually don't see any reference to Keemstar at all in that. So, maybe it was mentioned beforehand. I don't know. Maybe I knew there was some sort of beef between you guys or something.
Yeah, we did. We had beef on the internet, and I believe
Right.
at one point, I don't know if specifically it was like Keemstar, but I know you had said, is there anyone? I said I just want it to be us, right? I don't want to have guests coming on and stuff. I want it to be our conversation, right? That's what it was supposed to be. So,
Okay, so
having this guy is shocking that he's in there. Why is he on this interview, right?
okay, I get it, right? I get it. So,
Okay.
but with that said, we did finish up, and you were totally pleased with things, regardless of if Keem appeared or not.
Mhm.
You were pleased as punch. Said you want to do a second time. I said I'd like to do a second time, and to be clear, everything was great, and until the next day, right?
That's right. Now, to preface this,
Mm-hmm.
we had actually in our discussions about this interview, the discussion was we were going to do this giant, hard-hitting, harsh interview. And then once we got through it, I can't remember the exact wording you used, but basically it was kind of like, let's get through the tough thing. And
Right, that's what I thought. If DSP, he's saying like he knew it was going to be this tough interview. That, like, why? Why did he seemingly do nothing to prepare for it? He had no answers to any of the obvious questions that were going to be asked. WWE champions, the bankruptcy, the bank leaks, anything, the e-begging. It's just, again, at this point, I don't know if this is just DSP being so incredibly lazy, or if he's just so high on himself that he thought he could just bullshit his way through that interview and convince Craig and his co-host that nothing was wrong at all and just get an easy win because they had no idea who he was.
then let's do the fun thing, right? First, let's
Yeah.
do the interview. Then let's have you on as the guest as you were intended to be originally, right? That was the whole intention of this thing.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. After the interview, I jumped on my own personal stream and I expressed to my audience, listen, I knew it was going to be a rough interview. I knew he was going to ask questions that I wasn't going to be able to provide evidence of my side of it or whatever. And that's fine. I just wanted to have a place where people can see all of my answers, so they'll stop bugging me on my streams about this stuff, because it really had nothing to do with my content. You're talking about mobile games and expenses and shit. It has nothing to do with the broad.
It has everything to do with your content when so much of your content is you fucking e-begging. Obviously, don't get me wrong, like, DSP knows the reason why, right? He's obviously lying here. But, this is something he brings out often. Like, oh, we don't want to talk about my personal life, or you're talking about my, personal expenses. Well, when you beg people for money to pay for your food, your rent, your electricity online, and then you turn around and you spend that on, your WWE champions and copious amounts of alcohol, I think it's more than fair for people to question you, people to be speculative of, why you're using that money that you're begging for in your content on things you're saying you won't use it on. It's just fucking DSP.
Broadcasting I'm doing every day of gameplay and stuff like that. I just wanted it to be somewhere else. So I actually was happy that we had covered all of that. All right. So by the end of that day, 100%, I was okay with how everything had gone down. Even the shocking surprise guest and all that team, whatever. So now I would like to hear your methodology about what happened the next day on your stream, because what you had publicly said, you could correct me if I'm wrong. You had publicly said on Friday, the day after, you were going to do a decompression day where you guys were just going to sit around playing Mario Kart, shooting the shit, and having a fun day. That was the original intention after this crazy interview, but that is definitely not what happened.
Yeah, so you're right. I said we're going to do a decompression stream, and the intention was, and remember, once again, we're a month into the show, and at the time, we actually did test out like Friday gameplay streams, right? We were trying to test those things out. Now, some more context for you. The last time the audience saw Adam is the last time I saw Adam. So Adam left. He went to go have some dinner. So the first time that people saw Adam the next day was when I saw Adam the next day, right? Maybe 60 seconds before we started the show.
Let's clarify. Adam is one of your co-hosts, so people might not know. He's one of your co-hosts on the Side Scroll.
Yeah,
show.
he was. He's doing his own thing now, which is great, and he just had a kid, and like I'm super stoked for him. And he's welcome to come on the show anytime. Which, by the way, I do think that you and Adam should hash it out as well, right? Okay, so with that said,
look at DSP's fucking face. He knows DSP has no intention of hashing anything out, right? This is just for drama, just for clicks, right? Got within the proximity of PPP and Andy Warski's nutsacks, and all of a sudden he thinks he's fucking internet blood sports, and he's ready for the Ralph retort. Absolute fucking bullshit.
So the next day, we come in and we do a decompression, and really just for the first time have an opportunity to talk about what's happened. Usually this would happen like you did. You left and you went on and did your own decompression stream, right? And so that was our first opportunity to do our decompression stream. Now, Adam thought you were full of shit, right? And he said so.
And he was right.
In so many words, right? And when, I think that's the thing about the interview, which was really unique, was, I had done a lot of research on you and everything leading up to, based off of what right or not, what people were saying about you and questions about you.
Well, this is a good point to break off before we get to your Friday stream. So what exact research did you do? Like, who did you talk to? What information were you gathering upon when you went into this interview? Because I think people want to hear your perspective of what your notions were me going into this thing and how it turned out.
Well, I mean, I did talk to pretty much anybody and everybody that I could talk to about you. I mean, let me see if I can find my Google Docs about it, and I can tell you exactly what my research was. But yeah, I went in and made that. But I do want to finish my point here. And
okay, go ahead. Yep.
The idea that I had a somewhat of a background. I'd done a couple weeks of research on you, like way more research than you possibly should do for an interview, right? But my thought was, and I said this before and I'll say this again, I wanted to treat you with respect, I wanted to treat me with respect, and I wanted to treat the audience with respect, right? And I had a pretty good idea of what the audience was going to look like, right, for this. Here we go. I got this doc right here. Potential DSP questions, right? And this is, it's all various things that we touched on, right?
Now, where did this come from? Was this like you asked people what questions you would want me to ask DSP, and you made a compilation? Is that what this document is?
No, I think a lot of this was just through various DMs and communication, things that people had asked and wanted to know about you. Obviously, the WWEChampions thing, the various clips that, broader questions. How do you think? Let's see. I'll just go down the list. I've been told not to interview you. Why do you think that is? When you stream, who is streaming, Phil or DSP? What have you done to change the perception from a production standpoint, right? So, like I said, there's a list of these things.
Right.
And then there's like some of my notes in here, right, where we talk about, I remember one point in particular we were talking about your, you've been doing this forever, but you don't have a business plan or a financial plan. People were really hung up about your taxes, so wanted to touch about that. How you spend your money, obviously, with WWEChampions, which we can talk about that in a little bit.
So Craig, you have to understand, literally every question you just asked, I mean, just think about it. Every question you just asked is basically like personal stuff. And it's stuff that my
Oh, no. It's the detractor questions again. Remember, any criticism of DSP, any questioning of our Lord and Savior, Darkside Phil, is a detractor question. Fucking course it is. The thing is, like, the reason that anyone who asks you questions only asks you, quote, detractor questions, end quote, is because there's nowhere else to get information about DSP. Like, there's no one to support him, and if I remember correctly, they're going to talk more about this later, but, his dents won't support him, because if they try to, anyone with, an IQ above 90 will very quickly recognize that DSP is a piece of shit. So how do you, as a dent, how do you show DSP in a good light? You don't, right? You just don't engage with anyone, and then whenever anyone tries to question DSP or ask him any legitimate questions, oh, they're detractor questions, therefore you don't have to answer them. Fucking DSP Playbook 101.
Detractors would want to know, okay? So now I'm just telling you from an outside, you know, from your perspective, from an outsider's perspective, or even my perspective, it sounds to me like what you did for 2 weeks is you just said, hey, everyone who doesn't like Phil, contact me and talk to me. I mean, you even had a clip from It's a Gundam, one of the most infamous people who rags on me all the time, as an audio question at the end of the interview.
Papa
and
Gundam, yeah.
what I would like to ask you right now, and I hope that you'll be honest with me.
Sure, I will.
In your efforts to gather information about me for this interview, did you talk to anyone who actually likes me?
Well, I think I was open to talking to anybody who would, but nobody reached out that said they really liked you.
And Craig hit the nail on the head. Right, they're obviously, DSP is trying to walk him into implying that he only spoke to, quote, detractors. But that's the core issue, right? There's no one else to speak to, right? Like 5-10% of DSP's audience are his supporters, his dents. The other 90% are people DSP considers detractors because they, don't form his great shield wall of dents that protect him and hug box him from any criticism. Right? Look at DSP's fucking face. Right? He's like, oh, I got him now. He's gonna say he spoke to detractors. Like, there are only detractors. DSP, you aren't someone who has support like that. Fucking DSP.
And I don't mean that negatively. I mean, I said I was.
Oh no, there's a good reason for it, and I'll explain it in a second. But go ahead.
But so with that said, like, when you say you're going to do an interview with somebody and you say, hey, I'm open to talking to all people, if there are people who go out of their way to like you, they didn't reach out to me, right?
Okay.
So your theory of like I only collected things from detractors at the time, you know what? It may be right, but once again, it wasn't malicious. These are all things that people were curious about, and you have to admit, Phil, when you're essentially radio silent for a decade and people don't go in and they don't have an opportunity to interview you, it's important to flush those pipes out and just get it all out there, right? It goes back to the elephant in the room, right? When you have this giant elephant that everyone's staring at, if you don't have an opportunity to talk about those things, whether they're personal or not, right? Then they should be addressed, because that is what the DSP lore is all about.
Right.
So, if you did have to use the opposite side of this, the detractor versus the champions for DSP, not a single champion reached out and was like, hey, did you know this? Did you know that Phil donates to charity? Do you know whatever, right? And had they, then we would have. Now, with that said, leading up to this, you also knew what this was going to look like, because you prefaced me. I mean, I have our emails pulled up, and you gave me, sent me ammo saying, hey, this is what I think they're going to ask, and I feel like I've addressed a lot of these things. You sent me videos of you addressing these things, but as you said, you wanted this to be the definitive DSP interview, right?
Right.
So if you want it to be the definitive DSP interview, then naturally I should be listening to everybody who has criticisms of you. And if there is this lore that's attached to it, then I wouldn't be doing my job as the interviewer to do research, good and bad, about the interviewee. Otherwise, it's a fluff piece.
Okay. And fair enough, and I accept that answer, but now I'm going to give you my response, okay?
Sure.
And you probably don't know this, all right? The reason that my fans don't reach out and get involved in this kind of stuff is because my detractors, okay, those people who you were talking to get questions to ask me, systematically hunt down, harass, dox, and do horrible things to anyone who publicly supports me.
Harass and dox. You mean like OIC? The supporter who doxed other supporters and your detractors? Oh, but we don't talk about that, right, Phil? Because he kept giving you money. So nothing wrong at all. No problem with his doxing or his harassment, as long as he gave you money, right?
Okay. And I'm not just talking like, oh, someone was in the chat and said, I like Phil. I mean, they'll try to hunt these people down, find their social media, find where they live, find where they work, call them, harass them, call them pedophiles, do horrible things to them.
You mean calling people like Derek pedophiles? You know, Derek, who you disavowed on Kino Casino with Noel. But, you know, how many years were you ignoring the evidence? Derek's pedophilic behavior. You know, but it was okay because he was giving you money. Right? Oh, it didn't matter because he was giving you money, right? You know, calling people pedophiles. You know, being that way doesn't matter to you as long as they give you money. And of course, let's be fucking honest, Derek's still giving Phil money under alts. Right? We know most of his dents have alts set up. DSP literally went through with them and set up alts in the past, specifically so that they could keep giving him more money. And so that it won't look nearly as bad when like 5 or 6 people were the only ones who would give him money for months.
There's been supporters documented who give me a $100 tip and then they get hacked and stuff. It's really, really messed up. I mean, case in point, Craig, do you not remember? Maybe you don't remember this. It was like a week or two.
People who get hacked? You mean like King Tut? But of course, we don't talk about that, right, Phil? You know, when King Tut said they got hacked, you know, it wasn't your problem. You didn't care, right? Because that hacked money went to you. Then you don't care. Again, saying absolute fucking hypocrite. Fucking piece of shit. You know, chameleon. This guy has absolutely no values. He doesn't believe in or care for anything. Fucking DSP bullshit.
Before the interview, they tried to dox you. You remember that, right? And I told you about it. I said, just so you know, they gave your an address on the internet, and I don't think it's real. And you know, they did it to you. So if they're doing it to you, obviously.
And with this, I went and looked into this a bit more to see what I could find, and I couldn't really find anything substantial linking a legitimate doxing attempt of Craig to a DSP detractor. But if I did miss anything, if anyone watching this does know more, feel free to leave a comment so that we'll know. So obviously, you know, well, don't get me wrong, I hate DSP. I think he's a pretty disgusting person. I still don't support doxing, especially doxing Craig. Right, obviously done nothing wrong. He's frankly one of the few people who has, you know, been exposing DSP in a more mainstream view than a lot of other people have been able to. You know, someone who's not from the DSP detractor circle, but just being able to interact with him is enough for him to smell his bullshit. But again, to be sure, you know, doxing's no good. I don't in any way support that. At the same time, you gotta remember, DSP didn't give a shit about doxing when it came to OIC, right? Because OIC was giving him money. But now DSP is talking about doxing being bad. Again, fucking chameleon.
They're not going to, my fans who like me are not going to speak up in a public venue like that and be like, oh yeah, now I want to talk about Phil. No, they'll watch me, they'll silently support me, as they have done for a very long time, but they're not going to put themselves into the line of fire of these already deranged people, okay? And you maybe didn't know that. So I got to give you the benefit of the doubt here that...
Yeah, as I just mentioned before, right? Since he brought it up again, DSP is just trying to create a get-out-of-jail-free card for himself. You know, anyone who brings up anything slightly negative about him must have gotten it from detractors, because the only people who are willing to interact about DSP are his detractors. Because no dent can go out there and try and argue DSP's side, because it's inarguable. Right? Like, DSP puts all this stuff on the internet. You know, anyone with a room temperature IQ can pretty quickly discern that DSP is an absolute piece of shit. if he just doesn't engage with any criticism or question about him, then he can go back to his hug box and pretend that, he's the good guy and he's doing things right. But of course, it's fucking Phil. What do you expect?
I gotta trust you that you were doing what you thought was fair. But a lot of people were going into that interview thinking, okay, he's gonna ask tough questions. But at the same time, maybe we'll talk a little bit about the positivity about Phil's 16-year history on YouTube. The good old days, or even what's good about what he does today, how he's improved, stuff like that. Like, there was none of that. It was literally just like...
What fucking positivity? Right, like, is DSP trying to talk about, like, when he put up a fucking camcorder and recorded his TV playing video games? When he was throwing temper tantrums about Machinima because he kept breaking their contracts? Or when he was throwing temper tantrums about this is how you don't play because someone dared to criticize DSP? How dare you? How dare you?
Negative. Now, I told you I was okay with that, all right? But from, again, outsider, they're looking at the situation like Craig just sat around for 2 weeks claiming he did all this research, and all he literally did was talk to the people who hate Phil the most, compiled it into a ball of negativity, and threw it at him. And that's the perception of that interview at this point from those who aren't my detractors, basically. In fact, just to give you another example, Mike Clone, who I was planning on possibly doing a documentary with this year, said to me directly, you realize that Side-Scrollers interview was just for your detractors, right? Like, no one else cares. No one else watched it and said, oh, it was literally a detractor interview. And that's...
Right. Because anyone who watches you try and duck and dodge out of actual questions about your shitty behavior can't help but dislike you. Right? It's like, fuck, he's trying to... I don't know what he's even trying to say. Is he trying to say that, if, Craig had just let DSP talk or monologue about how all his detractors suck and hate mob and how DSP is actually a great person who makes amazing content, that would be a good interview. That would be, a good show. No, obviously fucking not. Right? Because Craig dared to do a bit of research about DSP and actually ask him questions. He dared to be an actual interviewer. Now all of a sudden, it's for detractors. Again, just goes to show, right? The only people who don't criticize DSP live in a fucking hug box with DSP's other dents. Because there's no way anyone who actually looks any of his content in the eye can actually come out of this supporting him.
It's all it'll ever be. That's why you should do positive content like a documentary, because you need to have parts of your truthful nature, your personable, personality come out. No one saw that in the interview because it was literally detractor question, detractor question, detractor question.
With all due respect to Mike, do you not think he was just puffing up your chest to try to get you to do a documentary with him?
Of course he was. I mean, let's be honest. Of course he wanted to do a documentary with me. But, from all this nonsense, there's always a little moment of truth, right? And it rings true. That interview, if you watch it back, you don't get to learn anything about me besides all the things people don't like about me. And
that's all there is about you. There is nothing redeeming about your internet persona. Everything you consider detractor content is just your entire history. Again, fucking bullshit.
that sucks, because that's there forever. That's a video that launched you guys into prominence for a while, right? I think
that fucking face. Remember this, right? DSP is saying that the interview launched either Craig, or he's saying he launched Side-Scrollers, or he's saying he launched them both into prominence, which if you can remember 30 minutes ago, DSP said that Craig was the super successful creator. He had a ton of successful shows. He was super popular. But now, DSP gracing the dregs of the internet with his presence, launched side-scrollers or Craig into prominence.
You can agree. Can we agree there? Can we just say that interview did give you a launching board to popularity, right? And I'm not saying that anything that came after is a result of me. I'm not. But was that not the piece of content that launched your show into prominence and people wanted to hear from the side scrollers?
I think that it raised awareness that Side Scrollers was back, but just to think that anybody who watched that, like, I would say we had, Phil, 2,500 people tuned in live to watch that show, right? We had 3,000 watching our show today, right?
That's right.
Of that 3,000 who watched our show today, how many of those of that 2,500 were there?
Probably zero, because your show today is a different show. It's completely different content.
Well, it's not an interview. It's not about Phil. And I think I recognize that, right? Now, did it raise awareness? Sure. Is it why the show's been successful? No.
And I agree with you. Your show is taken off, and I want to say kudos and congrats to you for having a very successful show now. I mean, it's blown.
And DSP immediately flips back, right? Again, you talk about DSP hypocrisy. At the beginning of the show, says Craig's super popular. He's, this longtime creator who's made all this awesome content. He's super successful. Then he says just a minute or two ago that, either Craig or side scrollers or both were, quote, launched into prominence, end quote, because of DSP being on the show. Now he's saying the opposite again. It's just, again, fucking hypocrite. Right, it's no values, right? I don't know, like, how is anyone supposed to take anything he says at face value? You just in the matter of minutes, it took him minutes to break one of his lies. Fucking ridiculous.
Up, and that's great, but people didn't know about side scrollers until my interview. Is that a fair statement to say?
It raised awareness, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
But just like our interview with the Tetris CEO, or us talking about Concord or Dustborn or whatever, like, once again, the show was changing. We were trying to figure out what the show was, and it took about a year before we figured out what the show was.
Yeah, you remember you were saying on the show no politics, and now it's like it's completely flipped. Like, that's mostly what you're talking about these days.
I disagree. I don't think what we talk about is politics at all. I think we talk about the culture of this stuff. Very rarely.
Fair enough. Okay, not hardcore politics. I agree with you there.
Very rarely do we actually talk about Democrats or Republicans or anything like that. No, we talk about the culture associated.
Culture, I get it.
Which I think from a video game perspective is way more important than whether a game gets a 7 or an 8 in a score. Yeah. And I think that's what's lended it, because at the end of the day, you see a number of the reason why side scrollers is working and our audience is growing is because we know that there are a bunch of, as we say in our chat, our community is called normal men. They're called normal men for a reason, because there's a bunch of normal men who are looking around going like, yo, what the hell's happening? And this isn't right. This is not normal. And the thing about side scrollers, we do the exact same thing now that we did a decade ago. It's just in a different package. Because a decade ago, we were laughing at all the stupid shit that was happening in the video game space. Now there's just way more stupid shit that happens in the video game space that we can talk about it every day. It's the same premise. It's just in a different package. So anyways, with that said, like I said, the show was evolving, the show was changing, and we haven't done like an interview on the show in, I'd say, almost a year. Because the interviews were fine, and they were originally supposed to be a regular weekly part of the show. But once again, it takes a while to figure out what the show is, and now we have a good idea of what the show is, who our audience is, and we're there. Now, once again, did those interviews help raise awareness? Absolutely. But I can't, I'd say it's a chapter of the side scroller story, and just as side scrollers is a chapter of the DSP story.
Sure, I will agree with you on that. The show today has nothing to do with me. I'm not trying to take credit for it whatsoever in that regard. You've done good for yourself putting it in its new own.
Except when he did, just a few minutes ago. But we forget that, right? Well, DSP might have. Fucking gin-riddled brain. Can't remember anything after a few minutes.
space and it stands out. Okay? So getting back to now, because we did get derailed there talking about the beforehand. So the interview happens. All of a sudden, all eyes are on you guys because you did this interview with DSP. Friday is supposed to be a decompression stream with Mario Kart, but instead it turns into something else. So now let's get into this. So what actually went down on that Friday show for you?
Yeah, we went in, we talked about things, and we do what we do every day. We just talked about what's in the news. The difference was that we were the news, and the interview was the news in the sphere. And people wanted to hear our thoughts about it for the first time, and that was the first time we'd got together. So, you listen to your audience, and when the audience says, we want to hear your thoughts about what happened yesterday, you do that. And for us, it was a Friday, so naturally we're gonna talk about it, and then we're gonna give the weekend to decompress, and then we're gonna resume the show on normal on Monday. It doesn't matter if Mario Kart was played or not. The intention was still the same, was to talk about what just happened the day before for the first time, just like you did the day before with the decompression stream. Mm-hmm. Now, was it what you wanted to hear? No. But was it honest? Yes. And honestly, I think that when it comes to the reasons why we were upset was, and specifically Adam was upset, was because he smelt shit, and whenever he'd say it it was like talking in circles. And I think that there's a lot of that stemmed from the WWE Champions thing. That's where a lot of the meat came from, right? So we asked you about that several times. We got the runaround on it. We all knew it was the runaround, right? We talked about you sharing your account, and then that didn't happen, and that was when the internet went out and everything associated with that. And so we were upset about it, right? Because we smelt the shit. And I think that there's and
there's Craig saying it, right? They smelt the bullshit with the WWE Champions. And it's just so ironic. I'm pretty sure Craig's going to mention it soon, but DSP admitting that he is the Down from the Raptors account, right? Just lying for 7 years, whatever, about that, going on side scrollers, lying, wasting Craig and his co-host Adam's time, disrespecting their show, just to lie about his fucking mobile video game addiction.
A lot of irony when it comes to this, in that just was yesterday. I get sent clips to you all the time, and leading up to this especially, where you talked about WWE Champions, and you said that you spent for forever lying about it, right? So with that said, do you think that you admitted to lying about this, right? Do you think that we had a right to be upset because we felt you were lying? We knew you were lying. You admitted to lying. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that we had a right to be upset the next day?
Well, let me put it into these terms. Okay, when a guest is going to be on a show and they're going to be interviewed, and they know there's going to be hard-hitting questions, and that was all previously established. All right, we knew all this was going to happen. That's why I agreed to do the interview, because I felt like this is going to be it, the definitive interview or whatever. Okay. Never in my wildest dreams did I expect that the next day after the interview you were going to do that. You didn't even tell the public you were going to do that. And now, let's be honest here. What actually happened on that Friday show is you talked to my detractors almost the entire show. You were reading all of their contributions as they rolled in. I think some of them were previously from the interview the day before. I want to be fair here. I think there were leftovers you hadn't shouted out the day before. And then there was a ton of contributions that came in that day from my detractors. So you just sat there reading them. And, okay, you're upset with me. You don't believe me. You smell shit. All right? But there's a difference between saying, well, we just did this big interview. We don't believe him, versus actually, actively participating in memes that they have about me. Your entire cast laughed ack on the show, Craig, together.
Right, because it's fucking funny. Also, this is DSP just avoiding the question. Right, Craig asked if it was justified for them to be upset that DSP lied to them wasted their time and disrespected their show. And Phil immediately pivots to talk about how they read detractor super chats. Of course, remember, detractor means anyone who doesn't fully support DSP, right? Because anyone who doesn't fully support DSP must mean they've actually seen his content. And of course, anyone who has seen his content and has a room temperature IQ recognizes what a gigantic piece of shit DSP is. Again, it just still shows how little he actually respects Craig. Right? All that stuff at the beginning is just fucking bullshit. Right? He doesn't respect Craig in the slightest. He doesn't respect his show. He doesn't respect his time. It's just absolutely fucking absurd. Another example, DSP is just a piece of shit.
As if this was something funny to do to deride Phil. I was the guest on your show the day before for 5 hours. I was on your show and answered hard-hitting questions. You didn't have to believe
Answered hard-hitting questions. Bullshit. I think that Craig's about to call him out for that as well, but it's something that, ironically, DSP does a lot. He equates showing up with hard work. You hear this from him before, too, where he talks about going on stream 6 days a week. It's like, you're there, sure, but there's a difference between being there and actually working hard. Right? DSP shows up. I mean, and again, as I mentioned before, to his credit, he showed up 5 hours to that interview. He was there, but he didn't answer any hard-hitting questions. He didn't do anything difficult. He just did a shitty job trying to, run away from any actual questions. It's just bullshit, right? This is DSP. We're talking about how he avoids the question. They're doing this interview because of everything that happened on the original Side Schoolers interview that was caused by DSP avoiding questions, trying to obfuscate issues. And his response is to avoid the question, redirect, try and bullshit his way around having to actually answer any real questions.
you the answers.
Hold on. Did you answer? Because you.
I did. Oh, indeed, I answered. You just didn't like the answers.
Phil, don't flip that on me, because you didn't. You were dishonest with us. And
oh shit! Kudos to Craig. Again, can't speak highly enough. Having to speak to DSP twice for that long, he deserves all the credit in the world. And yeah, I mean, he's absolutely right. Calling him out like that, and don't get me wrong, it's not super easy to do in real time. You'll be able to process that and understand, okay, yeah, this is the bullshit, this is the runaround, and then put a stop to it right away. And you can tell as this interview is going on, Craig's patience, his goodwill is starting to wear more and more thin. That's going to become a trend throughout the rest of this stream.
Smelt that.
It's still an answer. It doesn't matter if it's honesty or not. It's still an answer.
Then let me ask you this, Phil. Will you apologize for lying to us? Because that's where a lot of that came from. It's like, we knew you were lying, right?
Okay.
And I gave you an opportunity multiple times. I remember pleading with you, Phil, just come clean on this. And the opportunity was there. And had you just come clean at that instance, everybody would move past this. So I do think that, like, once again, why were we upset, Phil? What's the root of all this? We felt and we knew and we smelt a lie. We smelt it, right? So, and you admitted yesterday to lying to us.
One extra thing I want to bring up, Craig talks about lying in the singular. He's referring to the WWE Champions, because obviously that's one of the most obvious lies. But to me, this goes more into, the potential, if maybe Craig knew a little bit more about DSP content, because you remember he lied about the bank leaks too. He said on the Side Schoolers interview that those bank leaks weren't his. They were someone else's. And the detractors just assumed it was his, which, one, contradicts everything he had said before that, and two, is just wrong. Right? Like, there's evidence of, charges on the card that occurred at certain locations, and DSP would come back in his, summary of his day off stream and talk about, going to those places. Right? So unless the detractors invented time travel to get those charges on the bank leaks the day before you mentioned going to those places, I don't know. At the same time, I do want to say I don't support the bank leaks. However, I do think it is prudent to talk about them because they are out there. So I know DSP tries to say just because the bank leaks were wrong, that means everyone should just forget that they exist. But you can use both hands, acknowledge that the bank leaks are wrong to do, but at the same time, it's out there, and obviously it's pretty devastating to whatever DSP's case is at the current moment, like that he's actually not down from the rafters, or that he is down from the rafters but he's only spent like $100, or that he's not an alcoholic, he doesn't spend much on alcohol but he gets alcohol all the time, or that he's not an addict with DoorDash but he gets DoorDash all the time. Yeah, it's just DSP bullshit. DSP's playbook 101.
So that to me stings, because you're not only lying to me, you're lying to your audience, you're lying to my audience, and you're lying to everybody else. So you should apologize to me and Adam and Travis and Blabs and everybody else who watched that show, because they were expecting the definitive DSP interview, and what they got was lies. That's not definitive, Phil. That's the issue I had with this.
Okay, now since we're getting into the nuance of it, let's go.
The fucking nuance of it. I don't know why I still somehow expect Phil to act differently, but Craig brings up how DSP admitted himself that he lied on side scrollers, and talking about how disrespectful it was, and that was the reason why Craig and his co-host did the decompression stream where they were talking about how they could smell Phil's bullshit from miles away, but Phil got upset about that. And when Craig asked DSP, hey, do you understand why we were upset? Can you apologize for lying to us? What does DSP do? Does he say, yes, I know I lied, or yes, I apologize for lying? No. He says, oh, now you're bringing up the nuance point. Like, there's no fucking nuance about it. Like, he just called you out 100%, directly, point blank, and of course, right, what do we say? He's dancing around the issue. Right, fucking Twinkle Toes DSP, dancing around the issue. Fucking ballet. So no respect for Craig, for his time, for his show. So fucking scumbag.
The lies you're talking about are WWE champions. That's what we're talking about. Let's hone in on.
But will you apologize though? Because that's
Let's hold on. Let's talk.
I'm going to let this particular clip run a bit longer. This was one that I put in my notes that I wanted to highlight, specifically because when we talk about, DSP's scummy behavior, it's, just a lot of talk, right? We're talking about it. We mention it, we bring up these examples, but I think for anyone who, maybe doesn't watch a lot of Phil directly, just kind of watching this, just soaking it in, just seeing exactly what Phil is like when he talks to someone, really helps nail in the point about what a piece of shit this guy is.
All right, let's like man to man. Don't demand something from me now. Let's talk like men.
I'm asking.
Okay? If in that interview, all right, I had been honest with you and completely transparent, and I said, fessed up to everything, right? Immediately you would have said, that's great. Prove it. Correct? You would have said, prove everything you're saying.
We gave you the opportunity to.
Okay, now let's be real about this, because I don't want you to lie to the internet about it. I want to be real about this.
I will not. I'm not going to lie to the internet. I'm not.
In that interview, all right, you said to me, show me evidence of what stuff you're saying, show me screen captures or whatever. And I'm going to be honest with you. No, I was never going to do that on the fly, because I'm the kind of guy I want to make sure if I'm going to do something like that, I want to make sure everything's safe. I want to make sure it's correct. I'm not going to send you something just to say it wasn't good enough. I want you to show you the definitive evidence to prove what I'm saying or whatever, okay? So I'm thinking in my head during the interview, because I didn't know you were going to hit me with that. Honestly, I thought you were just going to ask me questions and I was going to answer. I didn't know you were going to say, this is your opportunity to actually clear this up. I never thought you would do that. So I'm thinking in my head, okay, how can I prove it? How can I do this? How can I do that? I need to get this stuff together for you, right? And you had left the door open. In fact, this is what near the end of the interview we were talking about this. If you want to, clarify everything, you can send it to me after we're done here. We even left the door open for that, correct? You remember that, right? I'm not making that up. That was correct.
Right. And to be clear, I actually have our emails pulled up.
Sure.
If you have those pulled up, I think that you can read your part and I can read my part, just so everybody is on the same page and there's full clarity on all this stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I don't need to read them. I know exactly what they say.
Well, I think it's important just so this is us talking, but
yeah,
we'd be ignorant to say that there's not a couple, few thousand people who once again, this is part of the story of how we got here, right? So I do think it's important because I don't want to leave any context out. So do you mind if I read our emails after the just our back and forth that we had after, because I think it does provide context to what we're talking about here.
Sure. This is the email that was sent after I got off the show.
Yeah.
Because I believe there was the email then, and then I emailed you again after I'd eaten dinner about, are you available? Are you going to be checking this email box? And that was where we had left it. And then the next day you emailed me something in the morning, correct? That's the chain of events.
Okay, so it happened on, I guess we talked March 16th of last year, right? So you emailed me at 8:18 and said, "Hey Craig, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on how the show went. I really hope that it was a big benefit to you guys. If so, this may have been the only time in history that my infamy has actually helped something. I know you'll want to get back to normalcy, but I'm looking forward to hearing from you again about the possible next appearance. My viewers are telling me that they think that you and Adam were too harsh, but I disagree completely, as I told you on the podcast. You are nothing but fair. But there is pretty much 100% consensus that the Keemstar bit was intrusive, gave him free plugs for his own content, and took away about an hour that should have been more on topic. I didn't mind. I didn't mind, but that's the vibe my viewers are sharing with me. I would likely be best for a repeat appearance to just be us, to avoid people feeling like it was a quote surprise or trick or shock me. How often do you check this email? I'm still 50-50 on showing you my Champions account at this point, especially because of what Keemstar said. I feel nobody would believe you even if you vouched for me, but I respect you and still considering it, despite the fact I'm incredibly scared my info will once again leak and hurt me." So that was the email that you sent me at 8:18.
Okay, which was 5:18 my time. Well, actually, I don't know what time zone you are, but it was
Central. So 6:18 your time.
Gotcha. Okay? So it was right after dinner. Correct. Okay. Now I will clarify what was going on. Okay. Now, did you see my show last night where I told the truth about WWE Champions for the very first time? Have you seen that at all, or did you just hear about it?
I had a clip sent to me, but okay. I haven't like watched the whole thing. I've watched like 90 seconds of it.
In a nutshell, all right. Yeah, the account was mine. I had it for many years, and after years of harassment by my detractors, I sold the account. Okay. So at the time that we're doing this interview, I don't have access to the account, so I can't prove really anything, right? All I could do is I could show you like a new account, which is the account that I had currently. If you remember, you would ask me straight up in the interview, "Hey, do you still play WWE Champions?" "Yes, I do." But it's on this new account. It's not the original account that the detractors knew about and were stalking me for all these years.
No, I don't really care about WWE.
Okay, no, fair, but
really
here's, I understand, but you have to understand the situation. So I'm saying to you, I'm 50-50 on sending it, but if you had said to me, "Yeah, okay, I'm still open to it," I was going to show you the new account. I was going to try to explain all this to you.
Fucking bullshit.
And say, this is why I can't just on a whim show you everything. It wouldn't have worked. You easily could have said, "Oh, you made this up. This is a bullshit new account," or whatever. Yeah. It's a convoluted story. It is, okay? So what was your response to me reaching out to you, saying, "Hey, I have the information. I'm 50-50 on it"? What was your response to that?
Yeah. So, and once again, let's make sure we have all references here. It's you send that March 16th at 18 p.m. So it's evening time for me, right? My morning routine is I wake up and I start prepping for the show, right? So we're live at 11. I'm getting up. I'm getting prepped for everything. I have not checked this email, right? I've not checked this email, and because I told you prior to in our original correspondence, I don't check this email. I don't check this email very often. Sometimes it'll go weeks before I check the email, right? So this. So so you send me that email. The following day, March 17th, I respond at 7:45. That's the next time we have any sort of correspondence.
Is that AM or PM?
That is PM.
Okay.
So it's been about 23 hours.
And you've already done your show for Friday. It's already taken place.
Okay. It is done. So here's my response to you. I said, and I felt like this was a very fair assessment of things. And you can tell me if I'm wrong. I said, hey, Phil, I think the show went okay yesterday. We talked about it at length on today's show as a debrief. I think we all left the interview mentally exhausted and feeling incredibly frustrated as at the end of the day, we want what's best for you, man. The things that are laid out about everything, the WWE mobile games, the bank stuff, etc., it just doesn't make sense, man. There's too much evidence saying it's yours, and your only evidence is just saying it's not. I feel like we gave you multiple opportunities to turn this thing around, but you just seem so dug in. Even in the face of insanely detailed evidence, you wouldn't take it. Even with Keemstar coming on, I tried to lay out the similarities you feel towards him and the way people feel about you based off of things that you've said online. It was tough. Honestly, I'm just disappointed, man. Like I said, I and we want what's best for you, man. We very much do, but you have to want what's best for yourself. When you're ready to take that step, I will gladly help you, man. Help you, man, on your journey. You deserve to get to level 2. I know you can do it, and that's the email that I sent to you, and I think that was very fair. I did not lie to you and be like, hey, Phil, it was great. It was spectacular. Can't wait to set up number 2. As I said in the email, we were exhausted from it, and mentally tired from it, physically tired from it, and we talked about that. We talked about that on the following debrief.
It's just the constant lies and avoidance just wears on you. Craig's pulling up like pretty detailed responses. He's putting up detailed examples. And DSP is just saying, oh, well, did you check your email? The email that Craig said he doesn't really check. Yeah, it doesn't answer any of his questions, right? Craig's talking about, DSP lying, talking about the disrespect DSP showed. But Craig, did you check your email? Apparently sent him an email like 8 o'clock at night. To my understanding, Phil's in the West Coast, Craig's on Central Time, so it's about 10 o'clock Craig's time. So he doesn't check his email for a day. That's it. I might be jumping a bit ahead here, but that's Phil's defense. Craig didn't check his email in a single day. Therefore, he was coming in this whole interview in bad faith, and he's just a detractor, just like all the others. Just fucking exquisite. It's when Craig talks about him and Adam just being exhausted from talking to Phil. Imagine this for 5 hours. It's just, I have a deep respect for Craig for putting up with this, because I don't have the patience for it, certainly.
So, had we done that debrief immediately after the show, chances are we would have said the exact same thing. Probably worse, But you can see in that email, we felt lied to. We felt exhausted, right? And the reality is, Phil, we were lied to, right? So, and self-admittedly, you said we were lied to, and we knew that. So naturally, when somebody lies to you, and continues to lies to you, you're going to be upset.
Right.
So we were
Fair
upset.
enough. Okay. So I will confirm everything that Craig just said is true. That is correct, was what was in those emails. I know for a fact that's exactly how it transpired. Okay. So now he said it. I didn't say it. He said it. He literally read the emails word for word. No one can say that I made this up. Okay. So we got to follow the order of events. I'm on your interview. 5 hours, hard-hitting questions. I lie to you about WWE Champions. You leave the door open and say, you can send me the information after to clarify all of this. Okay? That was said directly in the interview. You agree to that, right, Craig? You did say that.
Mm-hmm.
I go on my show. I say, that was a good interview. I'm okay with it. I even email you, say, I'm okay with it. I'm 50-50 about...
And just to make sure DSP doesn't talk through this, it wasn't just lies about WWE Champions. This wasn't just like 20 minutes out of a 5-hour interview. This was WWE Champions, lies about the bank leaks, his bankruptcy, and his hypocrisy with Keemstar. Right, this was most of the 5 hours was straight up lies and avoidance by DSP. You know, when they talk about being exhausted and upset, it's not because DSP was, being a piece of shit for 20 minutes out of a 5-hour interview. He was being a piece of shit for 5 hours out of a 5-hour interview.
Sending you this stuff. Do you check your email? You literally just publicly admitted you don't check your email. Right?
Well, in this situation, yeah, it'd been a day. Yeah.
So you ended an interview, the hottest piece of content you had ever made at that point on...
The hottest piece of content. Go fuck yourself, DSP. Again, this is the 4th time he's gone back and forth on this issue, but to the email, right, this is DSP's whole defense. Right, he, didn't answer any questions on the Side Scrollers interview. He constantly lied. He constantly dodged questions. He constantly avoided questions, spoke around in circles for the entire interview about everything. WWE Champions, the bank leaks, his bankruptcy. Solely because Craig, after the interview, didn't check his email for, we said 23 hours, for a day. I get that. That's it. That's Phil's defense. Yeah, it's like, it's no wonder that, DSP doesn't ever do interviews. Right? How does anyone who, actually hears this somehow defend DSP's actions? Yeah, it's just fucking scumbag. I don't know how many times I can say this. And honestly, as I'm looking over my notes, I think it might just be my thoughts for the rest of the interview. But I somehow, DSP somehow did it. He made himself look worse by doing this interview with Stuttering Craig.
Side Scrollers. You knew all eyes were on you. You knew people were looking to see if I was going to follow up with you and send you this information. And you decided not to check your email, but instead to do a show ragging on me the next day. Is that a correct statement?
I would say that in between me ending the show, being done with the internet for the day, going to sleep, and waking up the next day and then doing the show, like Phil, as we said at the time, you had one opportunity to send the stuff. It wasn't there, right? You passed on that.
Whoa. Passed on what? You just admitted the door was open to send you the information when I got it together.
During the show, Phil, during the interview.
Craig, we're on...
If Phil's gin-addled mind can't remember anything that happened during the fucking interview. I mean, obviously he's lying, right? Again, for anyone who didn't watch the Side Scrollers interview, Craig himself asked Phil to just show him his personal WWE Champions account, because remember, this is when DSP changed his story for the 3rd or 4th time to saying he actually had a personal WWE Champions account, but it was knocked down from the rafters. So Craig asked DSP, hey, just snap a quick screenshot and send it to me via email, and I'll confirm as an unbiased third party right here that you're not down for the rafters. So Phil, being the reasonable person that he is, ready to prove to everyone that he is not down from the rafters, immediately ignores that, starts talking in circles until his internet goes out. Right? Obviously, we now know that DSP is down from the rafters, but even then, right? Like the levels of fucking bullshit that are going on, and Phil, I don't know who Phil's talking to here. Maybe he thinks there are some people who are coming in who just don't know anything about him, and they'll form their opinions on him based on this interview. But if that was so, DSP is acting like a complete piece of shit during this whole interview. So I don't know what he's thinking. I mean, frankly, that could probably describe the majority of his internet career. But looking over my notes here for basically the next half an hour, it's just me saying the same thing, because this is just what happens for the next half an hour, right? Craig tries to bring something up, a valid question or criticism. DSP immediately stops, makes an implied attack on his character, then talks in circles to try and avoid having to actually answer to any questions or criticism. So instead of just telling you guys that DSP is a piece of shit and having us sit through another half an hour of this, what I wanted to do is just quickly jump to the ending of the stream, just because I think it puts a pretty nice capstone on the themes of this interview. So I want to let this run for a couple of minutes and just run up until the end of the stream.
Money in this nice destruction show that we'll do on Friday. That's actually what happened.
You're wrong about all that.
Okay,
right?
fair enough. But you asked me for my opinion, so there you go.
Sure. And that also tells me where your head's at. We were mad because we were lied to. Had you not lied, none of this would have happened. If you were just clear and honest with us, like you've been with like you were yesterday, everything, none of this would have happened.
Oh, well, Phil's pulling up his fucking toolbar. The fucking Discord toolbar. Just remember that. It's gonna come into play in a couple minutes.
Moved on, it would have been like, yeah, did we think it was full of shit? That's fine. And would the Friday stream have happened the way it did? Probably not, right? Would the monetize the hater stream have happened? Probably not. Because if you just were honest from the start, none of this would have happened. So you can point the finger at me all day long, but at the end of the day, Phil, what's the old saying? You still got 3 more pointing back, right? Back at you. So look, I'll take my responsibility. I hope you look within yourself and you take some responsibility in this as well, right? And that's fine. I do hope that we can eventually work together in the future in some way, shape, or form. Maybe you come on Side Scrollers and we do a regular show. If you don't want to do with a politics-driven show that isn't whatever you said, right?
Right.
You were extremely nice with your words, and by nice I'm being sarcastic right now. And when you told us to go fuck ourselves and all that stuff, so I would like to give you a fair shake someday on Side Scrollers if you're open to it. Like I said, I want to make sure that you and everybody else knows that I am open to working with you in some way, shape, or form. But I hope more than anything, I hope you're honest, not just with your audience, but with yourself about the situation. I appreciate your time today, Phil. I got some dad duties I got to get done. Thank you guys very much for your time.
All right. Now hold on. Before you go, let me say my piece too. All right.
Sure.
It'll be quick. I promise.
Yeah.
This is it. This is the end. There's no more feud between you and me. Do you agree? That's it. We're done. We can stop going at each other's throats.
Phil, I haven't had a feud with you for 18 months, man.
That's fine. Okay, whatever you say. Monetize the haters, but you don't have a feud with me. You want me to play Street Fighter with you. You don't have a feud with me. You want me back as a guest on your anniversary show because you know it's going to bring you hype and attention from my detractors, but you don't have a feud with me. Okay? But okay, fair enough. You don't have a feud. But we're agreeing to this now. It's over, right? We're done. We're good.
It's over. Yeah.
Okay. So, and you were asking me now, a year and a half later, will I be a guest on your show? Which was what originally was agreed to. Correct. Like, that's what you're saying. It was originally, that was the agreement. We were going to do the interview. And then after that, I was going to have the opportunity to be a regular guest on your show like everyone else had been. Correct?
Right.
That was the agreement.
And after the interview, I sent you that email saying like, we were just disappointed, right? And the offer wasn't there anymore after the interview because we felt lied to.
Okay, so
But
now
with that said, I hope we can move past it.
that's what I'm saying. Now that we've hashed it all out, right? We're all good. You're saying you're extending that olive branch, and you're saying that that opportunity is there again. Possible, not a lock-in, but it's possible that I could be on your show.
Sure.
Okay, I'm not interested. Go fuck yourself. Okay. All right, guys. So that is. If,
Yeah, that's the end of the fucking stream. Like I don't know what else to say about how awful of a person DSP comes off in this. He argues like a middle school girl. It's pretty fucking ridiculous. I mean, God bless Craig for staying there as long as he did. I know I don't have that kind of patience. I can't imagine what that was like. You could see the patience and his goodwill fading away, slowly draining from his face as that interview went on. It's just, whenever you think that something has changed with DSP, you think someone can't be this much of a piece of shit forever, right? Eventually, that small voice in the back of your head has to eventually get through, no matter how much alcohol, fast food is stuck up in there. Eventually, some tiny amount of clarity has to come through. But nope, it's DSP. This is why. This is why there are detractors. This is why 90% of his audience hates him. This is it. DSP is just going to go back to his hug box. He's going to laugh. I assume he probably thought about the ending to that stream all night. This is coup de grace. But I mean, this is it. Right, this is Phil. But been talking about Phil far too long than I'd ever want to for one day. Thanks to everyone who kept up with this entire stream. You are absolute warriors, true champions for listening to Phil for this long. Thank you and goodbye.